Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby. Alphalist is a closed community with over 400 CTOs who share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insights into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, please visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. This episode is proudly presented by Dell Technologies. They are a team of experts that helps you solving all your IT-related challenges and IT needs in your daily business and consult you in choosing the right end-to-end IT solutions or products. They offer IT technology solutions for companies of any size, tailored to their needs, and have a huge product portfolio with IT solutions and know-how. They can help CTOs through providing end-to-end IT solutions, be it laptops, PCs, workstations, or server, storage, cloud, and IoT solutions or financing. If you want to know more, please check the show notes to get a link. Welcome to the Alphalist podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today's episode is titled The Future of DevOps. And my guest today is Alex, and Alex runs a company that is publicly listed and has a market cap of, I think, 4 billion. And they actually had quite funny news a while ago when they announced in our founding round. The title of the news was PagerDuty raises 90 million to wake up more engineers in the middle of the night. Alex, welcome. Maybe you want to tell us a bit more about your company and then afterwards a bit more about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on. So Alex Solomon. I'm one of the co-founders of PagerDuty. I started as the founding CEO and ran PagerDuty for the first 7 years, and then replaced myself and took on the CTO position and hired a great CEO to kind of get us to a public company and beyond to that scale. And I've been CTO for a number of years now. More recently, I'm focused on a very important initiative at PagerDuty, which is how do we become a true platform? And that comes with flexibility, extensibility, configurability, and allowing developers to build on top. And we've already made some good progress on that. We have everything you can do in the UI is we have APIs for, and want to kind of continue to encourage that ecosystem to build around our platform. We've also done some really interesting work in the AIOps space. But before I just give a quick overview, maybe it's good to talk a little bit about where we started. So just a quick background on myself. Before PagerDuty, I was working at Amazon as a software engineer. And that's kind of where we got the inspiration for the product. Amazon was one of the pioneers of DevOps. I think they were doing DevOps before it was called DevOps. So the concept of full service ownership, where if you're a developer, you're on a small team, you build services or microservices, and you own them end to end, which means that you're responsible for not just writing code, but testing it, deploying it to production. And when something breaks in production, you get paged. Back then, we actually used pagers, and it was called being on PagerDuty because you carried a pager on your belt. So after leaving Amazon and seeing the value of that way of working, while it may not be fun to get paged in the middle of the night for one of your systems, it's actually really important because you're part of the team that built that system, so you understand it best. After leaving Amazon, I got together with my two other co-founders, Andrew and Bhaskar, and the way we came up with the idea was by thinking back from our time at Amazon. They had also worked at Amazon. What interesting tools and necessary tools had a company like Amazon built in-house out of necessity? And the on-call management tool came up and came to mind, and we saw that Amazon built it, but Google had something similar, and Facebook had their own flavor and version of it. So we thought, this seems like there's a need here for this DevOps way of working for getting paged for your own systems. And that's kind of where PagerDuty got started back in 2009. And then since then, we've evolved it quite a lot. We now do full end-to-end incident management, incident response. And when I say end-to-end, it's all the way from the alert to post-mortem for those big major incidents. It's also, we've also invested a lot in AIOps. So I was going to talk a little bit about that, but that's all about pattern recognition and making sense of all of these alerts and events and change events and grouping related events and alerts together. Filtering out the noise is a big part of it, and helping resolvers and responders understand the context. Like, is it just a problem that's impacting my service? It's isolated, or is it a cascading failure that's impacting lots of different services, or a systemic failure, or something caused by a third-party provider, like one of the big cloud providers. And you see this in the news all the time these days. Goes down, it can impact lots of folks.
Fastly is actually a sponsor of this episode, so
I was not
be very careful.
Any names. On purpose.
Yeah, I can imagine that there was kind of a lot of paging going on the last days then.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that load in our system because a lot of digitally native and more traditional companies that have lots of software systems, they rely on us, and so we see that load every time one of the big public providers has an issue.
And if you recapitulate a few years back, if I would have told you, Alex, you're going to own a 4 billion market cap publicly listed company, paging engineers in the middle of the night, what would have been your answer?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Our journey has been amazing, and people ask me, like, when we started this, did you ever think it was going to become so big and so successful? The truth of it is I didn't think it was going to become so big and successful. I thought, it was 3 founders. We knew we wanted to build a software company and a product, more a B2B product, and we started this in 2009. And back then, if you remember, it wasn't sexy to build B2B Saas. What was
everyone wanted to just build a B2C product, right?
Yes, B2C, advertising and eyeballs, and iOS apps. That was the hotness, and companies like Zynga and mobile gaming and things like that were very, Facebook games, mobile games were starting to really pick up. So we chose the unsexy path. We started PagerDuty with the intent of bootstrapping it. And when we saw that we were onto something and we had product market fit, we then changed course and raised money to accelerate. We also did Y Combinator.
The other way around, right?
Yeah.
I saw you received money. So first, I guess, Y Combinator, and then Wellington and Reason, Bessemer, Excel. That's like the crazy path, right?
Yeah. Well, once you switch paths, then it's about growth, and we were able to really sustain that. We were solving and we are solving a hair on fire problem for a lot of companies.
Yeah. And when did you realize that you're solving this kind of a heavy problem and you have to enter growth mode? And how did that feel? I mean, did you personally do that, or was that the time when you jumped on the CTO seat? Or I guess you were doing that, right?
Yeah. So I was founding CEO for the first 7 years. So I led us through the Series A and Series B, and then Jennifer, who took over, led us to C, D, E, and IPO. So the first 2 rounds was me and of course the team. But yeah, so after Y Combinator, we had raised the seed round, which was around 1.9 million, and we saw that we had solid traction. We were growing exponentially month over month, which was really good to see. And we started thinking, like, I think we're onto something here. We have a bigger vision. Like, we started with on-call management and alerting as kind of the phase 1 of PagerDuty. And we had this much bigger vision to expand to that end-to-end incident management plus the machine learning kind of pattern recognition that I was talking about as well with AIOps. It wasn't called AIOps back then, but we always had that in mind. Like, we have all this data, we need to apply pattern recognition and machine learning to it. And we saw that, you know, we had that opportunity to grow fast. Plus, we were also a little bit in the back of our heads where there was one of the big guys is going to enter this market, and they're going to realize that it's very lucrative, or a new startup's going to raise a ton of money and scoop us, basically like overtake us. So that's why we decided to do that. It was a rare opportunity to build a new category at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. And was your growth all quotes product-led growth, or was it did you do any marketing? What did you do back then?
Yeah, good question. It was definitely product-led growth. Like, early on, you know, we were, keep in mind, the company was started by 3 engineers with no prior startup or founding experience. So we had our biases, and one of my biases was I didn't really believe in sales early on. You know, I thought, you know, I looked at other companies. I looked at, like, maybe New Relic was one of the ones that we kind of looked up to back then, and it was, you know, Lou famously also said he didn't believe in sales and that it should be product-led growth, and the product should do the selling. So that was our initial approach, and it worked because we had a free trial. It was very easy to set up and very easy to adopt. And we had that bottoms up growth as well. So we would start with one team inside one company, and then it would grow to multiple teams, and then it would grow to the entire department, and it would grow to maybe beyond that to other departments. So we saw that happening within our customer base. At the same time, I was handling, you know, sales myself. We had a sales ad email, and, you know, I was getting on calls with customers, and I saw, well, this is adding up. I'm running out of bandwidth to do this. So let's figure out how to build an initial sales team. We hired our first 2 salespeople. This is, I think, back in 2012, and we saw an immediate spike in growth. So we saw the difference with, you know, it was inbound sales. It was not flying all over the country or, you know, meeting with customers in person. It was all over the phone and over you know, Zoom or whatever. I think it was Google Meet back then. But yeah, we saw that immediate impact that sales could have. And especially, I think we made the right choice there where we hired technical salespeople. We hired basically former engineers or folks who had gone through an engineering education who wanted to do sales. And because it's a very technical product and a very technical audience and a very technical buyer, worked out really well. They wouldn't have wanted to talk to a kind of, say, typical salesperson who's not technical at all.
So you essentially reached out to free users or trial users and made them convert in a better way, essentially, or?
It was some of that, like where we saw, yeah, we had a free trial, and you know, when you have someone from a large Fortune 500 company signing up for a trial, you definitely want to talk to them. And then a lot of it was also talking to folks who were already customers to get them to expand. And to see, you know, oh, they purchased this many seats. They're using all of them. Let's talk to them about their kind of growth path and about expanding to other teams, other departments. And a lot of it was that as well. So we had that kind of bottoms up land and expand.
Okay, interesting. As you're talking about paths, I'd be curious to know your like path as a geek or nerd. So. How did you get into computing early on? I mean, it's kind of interesting to land at such a to found such a nerdy tool. So I'd be curious of what you're up to or what you were up to.
Yeah, I think you know, probably not super unusual, but I was growing up in middle school and high school. I was really into computer games. So like playing first-person shooters like Wolfenstein and Doom, and, you know, the really you know, the really old school ones. And I kind of got interested in programming and making my own games. And I think my parents got me a QBasic book when I was in middle school. So I read that cover to cover and started building some of the examples and some of the games in the book. And then from there, I took some classes in middle school and high school. Some of it was around Pascal, some of it was around C++, and and then I did software engineering education at the University of Waterloo, and then ended up at Amazon. So that's kind of my path. I was always into programming and doing my own side projects, and was then got interested in entrepreneurship. I was reading Paul Graham's essays and reading about other companies that were going through Y Combinator and the advantage of doing that. And that's kind of how we ended up doing our own thing and getting into Y Combinator, and the rest is history, I guess.
And speaking of Y Combinator, is it really worth it from your perspective? I mean, you ended up with quite good VCs. Is that like all thanks to Y Combinator, or?
I would say yes, absolutely. For us, I mean, keep in mind, we were 3 engineers with no startup experience. We didn't know anything about fundraising. We didn't know anything about investors. We didn't know really how to build a pitch deck or any of that. So for us, we had the idea, we had built it out. We already had some customers paying us by the time we got into Y Combinator. So for us, the biggest benefit, and it was a big benefit, was it was a boot camp for fundraising. So as part of the program, Paul Graham walked us through the process of building a pitch deck and thinking big and coming up with that big vision for the company. And introduced us to lots of investors along the way. So, a bunch of them became our angel investors, and then they helped us continue to craft our pitch and our vision. James Lindenbaum stands out. He was one of the co-founders of Heroku, and he's now running HeavyBit, and he helped us a ton in terms of fundraising, and we ended up raising a very successful Series A with Andreessen. So I think, we set down that path of like looking at accelerating and raising money, and Y Combinator was instrumental.
And if you look at like times today, or your path, when did you discover your secret sauce, and what is it actually? I mean, it's, I guess, not sending pages to people these days, but a bit more. When did you discover, okay, this is like really, we really discovered our mojo, and this is going to be fun?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in that first phase of growth, it was definitely centered around on-call management and alerting. And what was interesting for us is that we were a little surprised that this kind of a product didn't exist already. And what we found through talking to customers and working with a lot of different clients is that a lot of them were building their own, or they were doing something very manual, or they had people in a room, basically an operations center or a NOC, watching screens and waiting for alerts to pop up. That's kind of the traditional IT operations way of doing it, which DevOps has changed and kind of turned around a little bit.
The classical Nagi OS together with I don't know, some SMS provider to page you, which
and passing the phone around.
Yeah.
Passing the phone around from team member to team member. And those solutions are, they're kind of janky. Like when you're trying to scale and build a very software centric kind of product or company, you run into limitations where something happens, a problem happens, the person doesn't answer for whatever reasons. People make mistakes, and at that point, it falls through the cracks, and that problem can cause many hours of business impact or customer impact on the customer's end. So those are some of the problems that we ensured, is that every single issue would get handled quickly by someone. And when you had a major incident that required lots of different teams and lots of different people, we would facilitate that response, get everyone in on a chat channel, usually Slack, and get everyone in on a conference call or now Zoom, and facilitate the response so that nothing falls through the cracks and the business impact, customer impact is mitigated.
I think it's actually a nice time to start, like even as of today, starting B2B SaaS products, as it's so easy to create value still, right? It like, especially at the time you started, was like a revolution. when there was this, or is still this mind shift of engineers who first thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to host it myself. It's like a free DevOps product I can download somewhere like Nagios, like an open source version. I'm going to host it myself. It's nice. It's okay. It does the job. To like something where like you really have like those great solutions like yours. When you suddenly start thinking, okay, if I take this solution and I pay Alex, let's say $200 per month, then I actually save one full-time engineer potentially that I would have to employ in addition to just maintain that Nagios. I think that's a great mind shift that is happening still, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have lots of examples of companies trying to do it themselves or find creative solutions to handling this, and then ultimately, in the longer term, they realize, no, it's better to just pay for a product that just works and handles this and works every time. So I remember one of our early customers, a social media company, was using a service for doctors for on-call doctors. So basically, when something goes wrong, they get an email from a monitoring tool. Then they have a schedule or an on-call schedule in Excel. They look up someone's name, they look up their phone number, they call them, and they read the email and the title of the email and the alert error over the phone to that person. And these folks are not technical because they usually deal with doctors and paging doctors. So they don't know how to read like the CPU 03 dot whatever is greater than 99%. It was an interesting solution. And then, when they realized that it wouldn't scale and things would fall to the cracks, they joined, they came on to become a great customer of ours.
Okay. And how did you become like a love product for developers, as like the topic generally being paged at night is somehow not like the most popular one, right? How do you make sure that engineers still love you?
Yeah, good question. So it's always been a love-hate thing, where they there's a little bit of, oh, I just got paged again. But what I've always said to that is that, we're just a messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. It's, you got paged because of a real reason in your systems. And what I would say is one of the interesting benefits of something like this that was a little bit of a pleasant surprise is that it provides a better kind of work-life balance for engineers. Because if you think before PagerDuty, what they were doing is they were just sending the alert to everyone on the team. And then what happens then is you get all of these alerts, or you're always on call all the time. And what happens in that case, you can't be on call all the time. So what would happen is someone will usually step up, and other people will kind of slowly back away, and it would end up being, well, usually one or two people that take the brunt of the load. And with something like PagerDuty, even just for the on-call use case, it's, when you're on call, when you own it and you're responsible for it. So it's this concept of ownership is really important. And when you're not on call, which is great because you can go do stuff. You can go out to a bar, before COVID, when you can still go to bars, or you can go camping, or you can hang out with your family, and you're not responsible for on call. Someone else is. So that was an important kind of quality of life benefit.
This episode is kindly supported by Fastly, the biggest challenger in the CDN market. Fastly is pushing ahead the technical boundaries and is, from my perspective, the best solution on the market. Fastly is known as one of the key drivers of the Edge Cloud movement. Well-known customers of Fastly are Shopify, the New York Times, Reddit, GitHub, and many, many more. If you want to try it all with first-class support, just go to fastly.com/alphalist.
So what do you think? Like, you went throughout like a few decades where DevOps really developed. It started with bare metal, and now it's about managing Kubernetes clusters. And at the same time, like the platform as a service world kind of developed in a way. It's not there yet, I think. What do you think will follow? How does it look like tomorrow?
Yeah, I think the way it's evolved is we've been moving away from large monoliths. I mean, if you think like 10, 15, 20 years ago, that's what software was. It was a large monolithic application built on infrastructure with a database and compute and a lot of shared services in terms of database and compute. And we've been moving towards service-oriented architectures where you break up that monolith into services that talk to each other, and now microservices. So the service unit has gotten smaller and easier to understand and more isolated. And now we have serverless as well. So we're talking about functions, and a service becoming a collection of functions. So while each unit has gotten smaller and easier to understand for a person or a team, the entire system has gotten more and more complex. It's a large distributed system with all of these services or microservices talking to each other, and it goes beyond a single human's capacity to understand the entire system and have it loaded in their brain. So the only way you can manage that level of complexity is by leveraging tools and leveraging data and leveraging things like a service directory or service mesh. Tools like your Datadog and PagerDuty and HashiCorp and all the AWS tools are really important. And it's about like having distributed teams that own those distinct units and that have that end-to-end ownership. So that's what I would say one of the core tenets of DevOps is around the full service ownership concept of you build it, you own it, you're writing code, you're getting paid for those systems in production. And I think, with the trend of SLAs and SLOs and understanding what are your requirements for uptime for those systems, is this a tier one business critical system? So if it goes down, like our revenue flow for the company stops, like a shopping cart or something like that, or is it more of a tier two? So if it goes down, you have a degraded performance situation. So I think the trend will continue down this path of more and more complexity. Software is eating the world to throw out a well-used cliche. So that's not going to stop anytime soon. And DevOps is here to stay. And as an engineer, you have to kind of become this almost like a mixed martial artist. You have to know how to not just write code, but have to understand how that system works in production. You have to understand distributed systems and distributed architectures. And while at the same time, what's great is some of the cloud providers are making it a lot easier for us. Like that you can get Aurora as a distributed database from AWS, and it works pretty much all the time. And you don't have to run your own MySQL and run your own backups and run your own multi-cluster systems, which can get very complex. So some things are getting much easier and nicer for developers as well.
So managing complexity is getting a bit easier, but you also went through all the good times as well. As far as I know, you're also into Rails, right? Or started with Rails, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we started with a monolith, of course. We started with a Ruby on Rails MySQL monolith, and we've been breaking it up into services for the last 10 years, and we still have the monolith, but we have a lot of services around it as well.
And I don't know if you ever listened to, for example, did a podcast with David Hanneman Hansen a while ago where he was like largely ranting against microservices and advertising the majestic monolith, as he calls it. What do you think about that? Is there some truth in it, or?
Yeah, I do think there are different ways to do it. So that is a very valid approach. I mean, I know. I have some friends who work at Shopify, and they've taken that same approach to great success, where they have multiple monoliths, and they've invested in the upkeep and care of those monoliths. What happens sometimes is that the monolith becomes kind of the legacy system, and that for better or for worse has happened at PagerDuty, where the monolith has become the legacy system. And we've been breaking it up into services, but that's been a very valid approach as well, where we've designed these services for scale, for failure tolerance, and for separation of concerns. And if you can layer on a backend for front end or GraphQL layer on top, then that helps manage that complexity of all these services. With a monolith, what's great is you can run a single query, and it's a single database, and you can do all the joins you want. In a service world, you have to call all these APIs and then stitch all that data together. And now we have tools for that too with GraphQL and some of these other architectural patterns like backend for front end and having API gateways. So it makes it easier to manage the complexity of a monolith. So I think both are valid approaches, but you have to really invest in either approach to make it work well. There's no free lunch, in other words.
Okay. Yeah, like it is always, right? But do you think I still need to manage a Kubernetes cluster 10 years from now? I mean, Kubernetes kind of appeared and now it's everywhere. And on the other side, we see like platform as a service. I mean, for you as a fellow Rails guy, you also know the quality of it, and it's in a way very hard to scale applications. Do you think it's here to stay, or?
I do. I mean, first of all, these trends in architecture and the trend from monoliths to service-oriented to microservices to now serverless is starting to take off, or the trend from bare metal to virtualized to containerization. These trends each take about 10 years from what I've seen. So they're very long trends. And even though a large company may have a lot of Kubernetes, they're still going to have virtualized stuff, and they're still going to have some of the old stuff as well, some of the legacy on-prem bare metal stuff, and it takes a very long time for these trends to shift. And I would say, secondly, what's been happening over the last number of years is that the cloud providers, AWS, Azure, GCP, have all made it easier to run a Kubernetes cluster. In fact, they run the cluster for you. So you don't have to manage your own cluster. You don't have to deal with that complexity. You don't have to deal with like the versions and upgrades and incompatible upgrades or non-backwards compatible upgrades and all of that. They just do it for you, and they offer it to you as a service. So it makes it not completely free, but it removes a lot of that operational load from you, so that you can just rely on their service. So I think that trend is going to continue, and you're going to use Kubernetes. You might not have to run your own cluster. Probably not. You probably won't have to run your own cluster.
The major clouds also all have a solution which in a way could replace your product. So I mean, looking at GCP, there's Stackdriver. Is that like competition for you guys, or is it still that like the typical developer just wants to have like a Pingdom or PagerDuty instead because it's something they know?
Yeah, it's not really competition because these cloud providers, their strategy from what I can tell is that they want to provide a good set of tools, but their core domain is around networking, compute, and storage. And part of storage is like providing more of a platform with databases as a service and such. But these other tools, basically, from what I've seen, is they provide a kind of a basic version of a tool. Like, AWS's CloudWatch, I know if it's calling it a basic version is doing it justice. But basically what we've seen is that as soon as you need monitoring at scale, folks are going to use something like a Datadog or a New Relic. And it's similar to all of these tools that are not part of that core domain of AWS, Azure, or GCP that are around storage, network, and compute. It's here's a basic version of a tool. It gets you started. It's great if you're 100% AWS, or it's great if you're 100% Azure and it works. But as soon as you have multiple clouds, or as soon as you have some on-prem stuff and you have other tools, and you don't just have CloudWatch, but you have like some HP and IBM legacy tools, and you have some on-prem stuff, and you have some SolarWinds, and you have this and that, the complexity grows, and you can't use the AWS native version. You have to use something that operates outside of that and that integrates with everything. And that's I would say that's one of our advantages. We have like 400 integrations. We live and die by our integrations. We've called ourselves the Switzerland of monitoring because we're friends and partners with everyone. And we work with all the monitoring tools from Nagios, 15 years ago, to the latest and greatest and most modern tools, and all the cloud providers as well. So that's how I think about it. It's not really a competitive thing. It's more of a partner thing.
And speaking about competition, I mean, there's a ton of tools available these days. I mean, you just mentioned Lou with New Relic and PagerDuty, Datadog. Sumo Logic, Sentry, and I think a lot of them are also taking the platform approach. Are you sometimes afraid of, I don't know, losing yourself in the large space of the platform world, and somehow losing focus and not fulfilling like the single use case that your customers initially bought your tool for?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we have to be very intentional about what we are and what we're not. So from early on, we've said we don't do monitoring. We are, like I said, the Switzerland of monitoring, which means that we're partners with everyone, but we're an aggregator. So we sit on top of all of the monitoring tools and we aggregate all of the alerts coming out of all of those tools. So we're not competitive with like your Datadogs or New Relics. We're good partners with them and CloudWatch and you name it. And we're very oriented around the people side of things. So we ingest all of these alerts, but our bread and butter is around ensuring that when something happens that requires human attention, that it gets to the right person or to the right set of people as quickly as possible. And I would say the other element that we've made a big investment in, AIOps, I talked about, like making sense of all this data, filtering out the noise, helping you understand the problem so you can get to a resolution faster. And then the other element that's really exciting for us is the world of automation. So last year we made an acquisition, a company called Rundeck, which is all about automated remediation or runbook automation. So it's about like when you have an incident, is there a script that you can run or a set of actions that you can run to resolve that incident in a repeatable way? Like, for example, restart the server is a common thing for a lot of these smaller incidents, or take the server out of a load balancer, or there's a toolbox of actions that you may want to take. And as a person who's on the front lines, who's responding to these, you want those actions to be at your fingertips. We kind of call this Iron Man mode. Like you get paged for something and you have this set of tools that you can quickly invoke to get additional diagnostics, like run some debugging scripts, show me the logs, give me this debugging and diagnostic data for additional context to understand the problem and triage the problem. And then there's a set of tools around fixing the actual problem. And then finally, if you can automate it end to end, like where it doesn't need a person to get paged at all, why not just do that in the first place? So that's an exciting area for us. And a lot of companies are jumping on the automation bandwagon in terms of how do you do more with less? How do you become more operationally efficient? How do you not hire as many people to handle operations and SRE and DevOps? So I think that automation is key to that. And of course, there's an opportunity to leverage machine learning there as well. And looking for ways to automate and hey, you've run this action in the past. Can we just do it for you now? Seeing that trend line, seeing that pattern. It's all about pattern recognition there as well.
Okay. So if I would ask you now what your top 3 recommendations for CTOs that want to build up or have to build up a service reliability engineering department are, what would be your answer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it matters about the scale. So if you're just starting out, like hiring your first, you're someone who, I would say, if you can hire someone who's done it before, someone who's led a DevOps team or an SRE team, that would be great, because especially at a company that's using the technologies or has used the technologies that you're using, that's really important. I would say, it depends on the maturity and where you are in that. If you're starting fresh, if you're starting like a startup, you can start using the latest and greatest tools and the latest and greatest infrastructure from day one. You can start using AWS or Azure or GCP. You can use all of their platform as a service functionality, and you don't have to do all of this yourself. In fact, you shouldn't. You should try to get to product market fit as quickly as possible, instead of worrying about how to run bare metal servers in a data center. Like, that's not a good use of your time, a good investment. And then you hire folks who have experience in that environment and who have led teams of SREs or release engineers or any of these kind of specialties to get that scale. But if you are a larger company and you're just dipping your toe into the cloud world, then what I would recommend is that you start building new applications in the cloud and you start thinking about a migration plan for existing apps. Then some of them will move to the cloud because they're low-hanging fruit. Some of them will take longer. It will be a phased approach. And I would say probably similarly, you want someone who with that cloud experience, but maybe someone who's worked at a larger company that's been in a hybrid environment where they have done some cloud migration, and they have experience with that as well. I know it's a hard question to answer because it's so broad and there's so many things to consider.
Okay. I would say you still consider yourself a geek. I'm also a very geeky person, and I have like those tools I pick up somewhere and then start recommending to everyone. So, for example, my last thing was, I think Metabase was one thing I found and discovered and recommended to everyone, or Airtable. Is there anything you absolutely love and annoy everyone with these days?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned Airtable. I'm playing around with it right now because, funny enough, the way I learned database programming way back in the day was using Microsoft Access. If you remember that, it's like a visual programming environment, but desktop on Windows. And it makes it really easy to whip up a quick little application. And I've been saying this for many years, like why doesn't a modern version of Microsoft Access for the web exist? And now it does. And there's a lot of companies doing that now. And what's great about it is you can whip something up really quickly. Like, if you're very particular about how you manage your to-do list, you can have a to-do app in Airtable. Or, if one thing I've been playing around with is like feature requests and tracking feature requests for the product side. I don't have anything built yet, but I've been kind of thinking about it in the back of my mind because there's not a good way to do that today, or I haven't seen a good way to track feature requests. So we might be playing around with that at some point. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Airtable because it gives you that flexibility. Plus, it gives you all these apps that are pre-built that you can start using or modifying if you want.
Okay, yep. I also love playing with it for like internal stuff, internal tooling.
Exactly.
That's just great to save engineering power and time. Then I still have a little surprise for you as an outro question. So I had the chance to talk to your co-founder Andrew, and he brought up this little surprise for you. So he gave me a very, very old hardware pager prototype that you guys must have built in the early days and later on abandoned due to strange behavior. And it has one feature that you folks somehow came up with. I think you personally invented it. It is called time travel, the time travel feature. And it still has a date preset in which I think it's July 26. And that is the month when you actually started working at Amazon. And we now have the chance to hit like the travel button and have to take the chance to observe you for a while when like young Alex was coding at Amazon, and you have the chance to now whisper something into young Alex's ears. What would it be?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, I would say back then, what do I wish I knew back then that I would tell myself if I could go back in time? That's a great question. I would say keep learning, and I was doing a lot of that, at Amazon. I was trying to, I joined the company as a fresh grad, and so I was kind of learning a lot about their infrastructure and learning a lot about the DevOps way of working. But I'd say double down on that. There's not a lot I wish I had done differently in the grand scheme of things, because we are here and we're in a good place. So I would say one of the other things I wish I had done maybe a little bit differently is I wish I had invested more in kind of getting better mentors, getting folks that I could talk to and explore ideas with, and folks who can push me out of my comfort zone. And then I would say also like focus on the flip side of work, which is kind of that personal life, especially if you work at a large company. Like you don't have to work 80 hours a week every day or every week. You can have a little bit more of a work-life balance. So investing in that a little bit. You don't have to like completely bias it one way or the other, but have a good balance there is important because you're going to build friendships while you're young that are going to last a lifetime, and investing more in that is really important, because then you have that circle of people that are going to be with you for a long time.
Great stuff. And on the mentorship piece, isn't that like one of the key values you get from Y Combinator?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the network is incredible. It's been super helpful for us in terms of like not just like learning the fundraising stuff that I was talking about, but also like relationships with companies and being able to get an introduction to the right person at a large company which is going to become a customer. So that's been really key. And I think our investors in general have been a great resource, of those connections in that network. But sometimes, an investor is an investor and not really a mentor, and having someone in a mentorship role where they're there, they can pick up the phone anytime and you can be very vulnerable in front of them and you can, open yourself up completely. It's hard to do that with an investor because they're also an investor.
Obviously,
so
they are
they see, Alex doesn't know this, then that could be bad. So it's just hard psychologically to have that go into psychological safety. It's hard to achieve that with someone who has a vested interest in your company.
Okay. So thanks a lot, Alex. It was super nice talking to you. Really great company that you've built there. Thanks a lot, Alex. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Enjoy your day.